We're towards the bottom of Mem Gimel Amud Beis where it says Eisvei. The first word on the line is Avuch. The Gemara here is discussing this that it says in the Mishnah later on Daf Mem Hey. What did they do in the Beis HaMikdash? They went around the Mizbeach every day. That's what it says. Makifin is a Mizbeach. They would go around. But the question is with what? So there was a Machlokes Amirayim here. Rabbi Lazar said they would go around with the Lulav, not with an Arava. But then there's other Amirayim here that said that they would go around with the Arava. That Arava that they would stand up at the Mizbeach, they would go around with it. So there's a discussion over here about this, and the reason why this is relevant to what we are talking about is because the Gemara had a question after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash in Eretz Yisrael, where they know the Kviyas of the Chodesh and they know the exact day of the Yontif. Why wouldn't we push off Shabbos like they did Bizman Shabbos HaMikdash Kayam when Shabbos falls out on Hoshana Rabbah? And the Gemara answered, because what they did with the Arava in the Beis HaMikdash and what we do with the Arava today is not the same. In the Beis HaMikdash, they stood it up at the Mizbeach, and today we just hold it in our hands, or we shake it, or we bang it, so it's not the same thing. So therefore, there's no connection, so we're not going to push off Shabbos today to show that in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, the mitzvah is Minat Torah. So the Gemara is discussing this now. Is it true that in the Beis HaMikdash, they would not hold it in their hands? So it's dependent on this machlokes. When it says makifim, would they go around with that rava holding it in their hands or not? So now the Gemara will bring a clear raya from a lashon of a braisa, where you see that even in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they would hold it in their hands, similar to the way we do the mitzvah today. Eisvei. So the question was asked. I said in the braisa, lulav doiches haShabbos b'tchilasei. Lulav pushes off Shabbos if the first day of Sukkah falls out in Shabbos. V'arava b'soifei. And Arava pushes off Shabbos when the last day, the seventh day, the Hoshana Rabbah falls out in Shabbos. Pa'amachas, once it happened, Chol Shvi Shal Arava Liyas b'Shabbos. So the last day of Sukkot came out in Shabbos, and it pushes off Shabbos. So ve'eviu murbiyos Shal Arava me'erev Shabbos. They brought murbiyos, which is these Aravas, but it's these very tall Aravas that they need for the Mizbeach. So they prepared it. They brought it to the Beis HaMikdash before Shabbos. Ve'nichom ba'azara. They left it there in the Azara to be used on Shabbos. V'yikiru behem baisaisen. The baisaisen, which is a version of the tzedaikim, they saw that they brought these aravas. V'notlum, and they took it. V'kofshim tachas avanim, and they hid it under rocks, because rocks are muktzah. So if they'll hide it under rocks, it won't be able to be used. They didn't want it to be used. L'malcha, the next day, hikiru behen amei haaretz. The amei haaretz noticed where it was. They noticed that it's under the rocks, and they were amei haaretz. They didn't know the halacha that it's really muktzah. But so these Amei Haaretz were not Baisaisim. These Amei Haaretz agreed with the Chachamim that you're supposed to do it on Shabbos. V'shamtum mitachas ha'avonim. They pulled it out from under the rocks. V'heviu ma'kayanim v'zakfum b'tzidi ha'mizbeach. And the Kayanim brought these Aravis and they put them up at the side of the Mizbeach. Okay? So that's the what happened here in the story. And what's the reason why the Baisaisim did not want that they should use these Aravis for the mitzvah? L'fishe'ein Baisaisim moidim, because the Baisaisim do not agree shechibot arava doiches haShabbos. They don't agree to this, that chibot arava is doiches Shabbos. Now, what does the word chibot arava mean? Chibot arava, there's a machlokes rishonim. According to Rashi, chibot arava means the shaking, the waving of the Aravis. In other words, the chibot Arava in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. What would they do to Arava? They wouldn't just stand it up by the Mizbeach. They would hold it in their hands and they would shake it. That's Rashi's pshat. According to the Rambam, chibut Arava means what we do today, to bang it on the floor. But the point is, from this lashon of the Braisa, chibut Arava, you see that they wouldn't just simply place the Arava by the Mizbeach and that's it. It says chibut arava, which means they would hold it, they would shake it, they would bang it, similar to what we do today. So alme benetilihi, I see that the mitzvah of arava is not just to place it by the mizbeach, but the mitzvah is to hold it in your hands. To yufte, so this refutes Rabbi Lazar's opinion that says that they would not hold the arava in their hands, they would only stand it up by the mizbeach. So the conclusion here is that the mitzvah of arava today and the mitzvah of arava, the way it was done in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, is similar. If so, the Gemara's question is, Ve'ela nitchu. If so, in Eretz Yisrael, even after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, we should push off Shabbos just like in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, because then it's the mitzvah, and now the mitzvah is done in the same way. Even if now it's not a mitzvah Minat Torah because we don't have the Mizbeach, but still, because it's a mitzvah that's done in the same way, we should push off Shabbos as well. So the Gemara answers, the reason is, why don't we push off Shabbos in Eretz Yisrael, kiven da anan loy dachinon, since us in Golus, we do not push off Shabbos when it falls out on Hoshana Rabbah, inu nami loy dachu. They also don't push off Shabbos. We don't want it to be different. Rashi explains on Amud Aleph over here that there's a concept of loises gaidudu. You don't want Klal Yisrael to be divided into groups. In Eretz Yisrael they do like this, and over here we do different. Then Eretz Yisrael pushes off Shabbos, by us it does not push off Shabbos. Even though you have the concept of Yom Tov Sheni, which our Yom Tov is different than it is in Eretz Yisrael. But for this extent to push off Shabbos, it's just a very extreme thing to make a difference between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. They didn't want it to be two different groups, and therefore it looks like two Teiros, Rashi says. And therefore, if by us it doesn't push off Shabbos, and Eretz Yisrael it doesn't push off Shabbos either. So, frak the Gemara, but for HaYantif, HaRishain, but when it comes to the first day of Yantif, regarding Lulev, the Ledida and Leidachi. So before in the Gemara we said that for the Lulev on the first day of Yantif, for us it's not going to push off Shabbos. V'ledidhu dachi. And our conclusion before was that for Eretz Yisrael, when the first day of Yantif falls out on Shabbos, it is Deicha Shabbos. So we see that we do make this division of Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. So now the Gemara retracts that. The Gemara is Chayzer. Amri, the yeshiva students answered, Lididhu nami leidachi. The truth is, just like by us we don't push off Shabbos if it falls out on the first day, in Eretz Yisrael the same thing. For Lulav, they don't push off Shabbos when it falls out on the first day. So the Gemara asks Charata of what it said before. So the Gemara asks, Ve'ela kashya hani tarti. But if so, now we have a question of these, the lashon of these two Mishnahs. The Tani Chada in one Mishnah it says, Kala melichnes lulaveyan laharabayis. That on Shabbos they would bring their lulav before Shabbos to the Beis HaMikdash, to the harabayis. V'tani idach. And in another Mishnah it says, lebeis HaKnesses. That they would bring their lulav to the shul, to the Beis HaKnesses, not to the Beis HaMikdash. U'mitartzinon, what did we answer before? Kam bezman shebeis HaMikdash kayam, and kam bezman she'ein Beis HaMikdash kayam. That the Mishnah that says harabayis is when the Beis HaMikdash is standing, it pushes off Shabbos. And when it says the shul, it's when the Beis HaMikdash is not standing. And it pushes off Shabbos even after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash. So how can we say that regarding Lulav, that it does not push off Shabbos? But it says in the Mishnah, you bring it to the Beis HaKnesses. So the Gemara says a different answer now. Loi, that's not the right answer. Idi v'idi bizman shebeis hamikdash kayam. Both of those Mishnahs are talking about when the Beis Hamikdash is standing. V'loi kashya, and it's not a question. Kan b'mikdash and kan b'gvulin. One Mishnah is talking about in the Beis Hamikdash, they would bring the lulav to the Beis Hamikdash, and another one is talking about in the Beis HaKnesses, outside in Gvulin and the other places. And it's like Rashi here brings in Eretz Yisrael, in those times when they still had a bezdin of smuchin and they knew exactly when the Chodesh was, right? So then they would bring the lulav to the Beis HaKnesses and it would push off Shabbos. But after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, in a time when we don't know the kviyas of the Chodesh, and in Chutz La'aretz it's not Deicha Shabbos, in Eretz Yisrael it's also not Deicha Shabbos. It's the same thing. That's the maskan of the Gemara, and that's the way it is today. Shabbos is never Deicha Shabbos, not for the mitzvah of lulav and not for the mitzvah of arava. But the interesting thing is, and this is what we had before in the Gemara, regarding lulav, it could happen that the first day of Sukkot falls out in Shabbos many times. When it comes to Hoshana Rabbah, it'll never fall out in Shabbos. That's one of the reasons why Rosh Hashanah can't be on a Friday. Lo yadu Rosh. Why can't it be on a Friday? Because if Rosh Hashanah is on a Friday, Hoshana Rabbah is going to be on Shabbos. And we don't want Hoshana Rabbah to ever fall out in Shabbos. So there's a sikha where the Rebbe talks about the Sinyan. It's also connected to Taisus before, where the Rebbe says, look, it's an unbelievable thing. The mitzvah of lulav, which l'chayr is the ikr mitzvah, the ta'al minim. That's something that sometimes falls out in Shabbos and we push it off. Arava, which is not even mefurish in the Torah, as the Gemara said before, it doesn't say beferish the mitzvah of Arav in the Torah. It's learned out from the fact that it says Arvei Loshen Rabim, or according to another opinion, it's Halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It's not beferish in the Torah. This we make sure that it should never fall out in Shabbos, never to miss the mitzvah of Arava. It's more chashuv in that sense. And the Gemara before said, we want to be mefarsim that this is min Torah. Why is it so? So, Beruch Nisan Yanim, the Rebbe explains that the point is that Rava is that simple yid. The lulav, the hadassim, the esrik, each one of them has a certain maila, whether it's the good smell, whether the good taste. So it's talking about the level of a yid where he has a certain maila of who he is. What's that Rava? That Rava has no smell, has no taste. So what is he? he also belongs in the Daled Minim. Why? Because he's the simple Yid that connects to the Eibishter with Emunah Pshuta, without any of his own flavor that he puts into his connection. That simple connection is more powerful than the Daled Minim. When you separate the Arava for itself, and it's a separate mitzvah, that they would make a whole celebration out of that Arava. In the time of the Beis HaMikdash, besides the mitzvah of Daled Minim, there was a separate mitzvah that they focused a special attention to the Arava. Why? Because the Arava represents a deeper connection, more even than the Daled Minim itself. It's similar to the famous word that it says, "Benegei to Nisach HaMayim." Just like Nisach HaMayim was such a big attention on Sukkot, the whole simcha was with the Nisach HaMayim. Why? Because the wine has a good taste. The wine refers to a person's understanding and his level that he could comprehend. The water represents that direct connection, which is it's clear, it has no taste, and it's the plain simple connection of a yid. It's the same thing with the Arava. Arava has no taste, it has no smell, and that's the direct connection. That's why we see over here that dafka regarding the Arava, there was a special inyan in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, and even today, Hoshana Rabbah will never fall out on Shabbos. The Etzem Neshama, correct.
That's why the shofar in Elul is higher than...
Yeah, also says that, similar when we get to the shofar, yeah. Okay, let's continue. Zok the Gemara, Amalei Abaye le Rabba. The Bach says Rabba. So Abaye said Rabba. Ma'ishno lulav. What's the difference when it comes to lulav? Davdina le shiva zeichel mikdash. That today, as a zeichel for the Beis HaMikdash, we do the mitzvah of lulav all 7 days. Ma'ishna Arava, and what's the difference when it comes to the Arava? The loy avdina la shiva zeichel mikdash. That we don't make that zeichel. We don't have Hoshana Rabbah. We don't take the Aravas every single day of Sukkot. We have it just on the last day on Hoshana Rabbah. Why don't we do it all 7 days like it was in the Beis HaMikdash? All 7 days they brought that Rav into the Beis HaMikdash. Amalei, so Rabbi said, because Hoyil v'Adam Yetzi dechayvasai ba'Arava shebalulav. Because this inyan of Arava, you can be Yetze with the Arava that's there in the lulav. So you don't have to have the Arava separately every single day. Amalei, so Abai asked him, but that's not, no, that Arava in the lulav is not the separate Arava. Hahu mishum lulav utakavetlei. That Arava that's inside of the lulav, that's the Arava that's part of the mitzvah of Daled Minim. It's part of the mitzvah of lulav. But in the Beis HaMikdash, there was a separate thing, that they had the Arava separately. Now if you're going to argue and say, the kamagbelei, v'hada magbelei, that maybe today, you don't have to bring that Arava separately all 7 days, but what you'll do is you pick up the lulav and esrog once to do the mitzvah of lulav esrog, and then pick up the lulav a second time, not for the lulav, but for the Arava that's inside the lulav. Right? The Arava is there inside, so you pick it up a separate time for the Arava inside, and that's how you yetze the mitzvah of Arava all 7 days. So the Gemara says, but we don't do this though. We see every year when it comes Sukkot, every year, every day of Sukkot, we don't do this. We don't take the lulav twice, once for the mitzvah of lulav and once for the Arava that's inside the lulav. Soon we'll see in the Gemara that according to another opinion, this is not even an option b'chlal. The Arava has to be dafka separate from the lulav. But even if the Arava, the mitzvah of Arava, could be part of the lulav, but the fact is we see that we don't pick up the lulav twice, once for lulav and once for Arava. So the question remains, why today don't we make a zeicha for the Arava all 7 days? Amar Rav Zvid mishmei de Rava. So Rav Zvid answered the name of Rava. Lulav, the oiraisa, the lulav, the mitzvah of lulav, which is menat teire, of dinan shiva zeicha mikdash. So therefore, for this, we make a zeicha all 7 days, zeicha to the time of the Beis HaMikdash, that there was all 7 days menat teire. Arava de Rabbanan. The mitzvah of Arava is a mitzvah mid Rabbanan. So it doesn't have the same level of chshivas. Lo yavdina le shiva zeichel mikdash. So therefore we don't make a zeicha for this all 7 days. Frag the Gemara leman. According to who is he saying this answer? That that Arava is only mid Rabbanan. Ilay mala Abishol. Is it according to the opinion of Abishol? This was before in the Gemara on Daf Lamed Dalet. Ha'amar, but Abishol said it is minat Torah because Arvei Nachal Ksiv. It uses a plural term of Arvei Nachal. Shtayim is 2 mitzvahs here. Achas lululiv. One is the Arava that you need for the lulav, and v'achas lemikdash. And the second one was in the Beis HaMikdash when they put it by the mizbeach, or they walked around the mizbeach with it. So he says it's learned from a pasuk. It is minat Torah. The Rabbanan say that the source is not this pasuk, but what did they say? Hilchas Gemirilah. The Rabbanan said that the mitzvah of this, the separate mitzvah of Arava is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So he said that there's 3 things that were taught together as a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. The halacha of Eser Netiyos, I explained it then when we learned the Gemara and Daf Lamed Daled. This is in connection to Shemitah. Shemitah starts even 30 days before Shemitah starts, and you're not allowed to work in the field 30 days before. But if you have trees that are spread around in a base of 50 by 50 amas, and you have trees there, you're allowed to do some work there to preserve the trees that they shouldn't die. So that's it has to be a sapling, right? Young trees that if you're not going to do this, they're going to die. Arave, this halacha here of the Arave in the Beis Hamikdash, and Nisach Hamayim, pouring of the water in the Beis Hamikdash, halacha l'Moshe Misinai. These three things were taught together as a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So we see that it's not mid'Rabbanan. Either it's a pasuk or it's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So why is he answering that we don't make a zeicha all 7 days because it's mid'Rabbanan? It's not true. It's not. Ela Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rave. So Rav Zvid said in the name of Rave, Lulev, the Islay Ikim Natayre Bigvulin, the mitzvah of Lulev that has the mitzvah, even outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Minatayre, right? The first day of Sukkah is Minatayre all over in the world. So therefore, of Dinalei Shiva Zeichel Mikdash. So for this, we make the Zeichel all 7 days that it should be Zeichel Mikdash. Because it's more of a chashiv a mitzvah. How do we see it's more chashiv? Because it has an ikim in Atayre the first day at least. Arave, the last day ikim in Atayre begvulim, but Arave, outside of the Beis Hamikdash, it's no mitzvah in Atayre at all. It's a mitzvah in Atayre, but only in the Beis Hamikdash. Outside the Beis Hamikdash, there is no mitzvah Arave. So therefore, lo yavdinon shiva zeichel Mikdash. So for this, we don't make the zeicher of Arave 7 days. We just make it the zeicher 1 day, just on Shana Rabbah. The Ran actually says a very simple point. He says when it comes to the lulav, if you're going to want to make a zeicher for the lulav 1 day, it's not going to be a zeicher l'mikdash, because that 1 day is minatayre b'gvulin. So there's no zeicher l'mikdash for this. Arave, since there is no mitzvah b'chlal to do it outside of the Beis Hamikdash, when you do it even just 1 day, that serves as a zeicher l'mikdash, because otherwise it's not even a mitzvah b'chlal to do it here. So 1 day is enough to make that zeicher l'mikdash. Amar Reish Lakish, here's another halacha regarding how the Arava was done in the Beis Hamikdash. So Reish Lakish said, Kayanim Bali Mumin. Kayanim, even if they're Bali Mumin, so they have a blemish and they can't serve in the Beis Hamikdash, and there's a certain space that only those that do the Aveda are allowed to enter. But if you can't do the Aveda, if you're a Yisrael, or if you're a Kayan of Balmum, you're not supposed to enter in that area. But so Reish Lakish says, the Kayanim that are Bali Mumin, Nichnasin Bein Ha'olam V'Lam Mizbeach, they are allowed to enter inside the Azara in the area that's between the Ulam and the Mizbeach, in order to do the mitzvah of Arava. Even though usually there's only the first 11 amas, I believe it is, from the Azara that you're allowed to enter, and further than that, if you're not doing the Aveda, you're not allowed to go in. But for the purpose of the mitzvah of Arava, even the Kainim that don't usually do the Aveda, because they're Bali Mumin, are allowed to enter there. Rabbi Yechanan said to Reish Lakish, Mi Amra, who said this Chiddush? In other words, he disagreed with this. So the Gemara asks, Mi Amra? You want to know who said this? Ha'iyu Amar. Rabbi Yechanan is the one that said this. In other words, as Rashi says, at this point, the Gemara is thinking that the question over here of Mi Amra is, like, who's the one that said Bechlal that there's a mitzvah of Arava in the Beis Hamikdash? So the Gemara says, who said that it's a mitzvah of Arava? Rabbi Yechanan said, because Ha'iyu Amar, the Amar Rab Asi, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Mishum Rab Nechunya Ish Bikas Beis Chorsan, as we just quoted, Esen Etiyas, Arava, and Nisach Hamayim, it's halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So this is the halacha l'Moshe Misinai of the mitzvah of Arava. And he himself is the one that quoted it in the name of Rab Nechunya. Elo, so the Gemara explains, the question of Rabbi Yechanan was as follows. There were 2 chidushim that Reish Lakish said that he disagreed with. The mitzvah of Arava, of course, he held of it. It's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. But there were 2 details here. One is, Mi Amra ben Etila, who says that the Arava has to be held in your hand and go around the Mizbeach with it? Dilme bezekife. Maybe it just has to be stood up on the Mizbeach. So in other words, he's asking Reish Lakish, why are you allowing these Kainim that are Bali Mumin to walk around over there with it? If you have to walk around, so then, as Rashi explains, then the halacha actually was that each one of the Kainim would have to walk around with an Arava. Not just one Arava. Each one of the Kainim would go around. So therefore that would include even the Kainim that are Bali Mumin. If the mitzvah is just to stand it up on the Mizbeach, so then you have one Arava that you stand up by the Mizbeach. So why should the Kainim Bali Mumin be allowed to go and do this? You just have to stand up one by the Mizbeach. That was his question. So who says it's Benatila? Maybe it's Bezekifa. Now another question is, Mi Omra B'Bali Mumin. Even if you're going to say that it's a mitzvah for all the Kainim to hold Arava and walk around the Mizbeach, but who says that includes the Kainim Bali Mumin? Dilma betwimim. Maybe the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is just like all other karbanis that are done in the Beis Hamikdash. Who's allowed to do the avodah of the karbanis? Only a kayin that's a tamim, not a balmum. So maybe this halacha l'Moshe Sinai regarding Arava is the same thing, even if all kayinim have to do it, but not a balmum. So he was asking, what's your source that even a kayin balmum could go ahead and do this? Itmer, we learned another machlekes regarding the mitzvah of Arava. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi argued, Chadama, one said, Arava, the mitzvah of Arava, Yisoid Nevi'im. It was instituted by the Nevi'im. The meaning of this expression, Yisoid Nevi'im, is that it's an obligation. It was instituted as a chiyuv, this mitzvah of Arava. V'chadamar, another opinion said, Arava minig Nevi'im. The Arava wasn't instituted as an obligation, but it was a minig. It was made as a minig that it should be done, but it was never instituted as an obligation. And Rashi says the difference if it's an obligation or just a minig is whether you can make a bracha on it. You could only make a bracha if it's a chiyuv, but if it's a minig, you can't make a bracha. Okay, so that's the machlokes. So first the Gemara says, Tistayim, I'll bring you a proof that Rabbi Yochanan hu da'ama, Rabbi Yochanan is the one that said Yisoid Nevi'im, that they instituted it as an obligation. Da'amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Arava Yisoid Nevi'im. That Arava is, they instituted it as an obligation. Tistayim, this is a clear proof that this is what Rabbi Yochanan said. But now the Gemara questions this. Amalei Rav Zera le Rabbi Avo, Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan say that the Nevi'im are the ones that instituted this? But V'amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Nechunya ish bikas beis chursan, Esen etiyas, Arava, Nisach hamayim, these three things. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. As we just said, this is the Nevi'im didn't institute it. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Ishtaimim kisha chada. When he was asked this question, when Rabbi Avo was asked this question, he was astounded. He didn't answer. He remained quiet. And then, when he answered, he said, V'amar, he said as follows, Shakchum, it was halacha l'Moshe Sinai, but it was a forgotten halacha, and v'chazr v'yastam. And the Nevi'im came, and they brought it back, and they instituted it again. So true, it is halacha l'Moshe Sinai, but they brought it back after it was forgotten. Fragt the Gemara, Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi, did Rabbi Yochanan say that this is what happened, that when they went to Golus Bavel, they forgot it, and then they came back to the second Beis Hamikdash, the Nevi'im then, which is Chagi, Zechariah, Malachi, they are the ones that instituted it again. But Rabbi Yochanan holds that they didn't forget anything. V'ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, Di l'chaim. He was speaking to his own students in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan was in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan was saying that I thought that the Torah is yours. In other words, the students in Eretz Yisrael. And then Amri, then we said, Di l'chaini. That really the Torah belongs to the Yidden that are in Bavel. And the reason why he said that is, Rashi here brings that Rav Kahana, which was from the Talmidim of Rav of Bavel, he came up to Eretz Yisrael and he was a very sharp student. And Rabbi Yochanan heard the Divrei Torah from Rav Kahana. So Rabbi Yochanan said, wow, I thought that we have Torah. Now I see that the Yidden in Bavel, they have the Torah much more than we have. And the reason is because when the Yidden went into Golus Bavel, Rashi brings the pasuk over there, that there were very big chachamim that went down to Bavel and they preserved the Torah in Bavel. And they actually have the Torah in Bavel even more than we have it in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore he said, Dulahaini, the Torah belongs to the Yidden in Bavel. So if so, the Gemara's question is, we can't say that according to Rabbi Yochanan, what happened was when they went to Bavel, they forgot it, and then the Nevi'im reinstituted it. They didn't forget it at all. So therefore the Gemara gives a different answer. Loi kasha, there's no questioning. Kam b'mikdash. This that Arava is the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is the Arava that's done at the Beis Hamikdash by the Mizbeach. Kan b'gvulin. The whole argument between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, whether it's a Yisoid Nevi'im or Minig Nevi'im, is talking about today. Bisman hazeh. This that we do the mitzvah of Arava today or outside the Beis Hamikdash, who instituted that? Minatayr, it's only in the Beis Hamikdash. That was an argument, if it's a Yisoid Nevi'im or it's a Minig Nevi'im. Okay, interesting. So the Taisus over here, this is a very famous Taisus, a long Taisus, and the main thing that Taisus talks about, just one point, is the halacha of a bracha on halal on a shchedish. Because as I mentioned before, Rashi says that the nafkamina here is, if it's only a Minig Nevi'im, you don't make a bracha on Arava. Like today, do we make a bracha on the mitzvah of Arava on Ishan Arava? No. Why? Because it's only a Minig. And on a Minig, you don't make a bracha. So Taisa says, saying halal on a shchedish is only a minig. It's not a chiyuv. So therefore, l'chayri, you shouldn't make a bracha. Like you see here, Rashi says. But then Taisus brings another shitta and says that maybe halal is different. Arava, because it's just a very, very small, minor action. It's just about holding it in your hands or maybe shaking it in your hands. So that doesn't deserve a bracha. Mashenkin halal, when you're reading the whole entire halal, even if it's a minig, maybe that you do make a bracha. So there's a discussion in Taisus about this. And Ad Hayom Hazeh, this is something which is not resolved. And even in Minig Chabad, there are those that make a bracha, there are those that don't make a bracha. Chassidim Amon never made a bracha. The Rebbe used to make a bracha. Akopanim, it's something that even you go today in a shul, some will make a bracha, and some will be yetzer with the shliach tzibur and not make a bracha. This is one of the places in Shas where there's here and in brachas where Taisus discusses this subject. Yeah, specifically Rish Chodesh. Rish Chodesh, it's not a chiyuv. Now on Yontiv, when you say the whole halal, then it's a chiyuv. But in Rish Chodesh, where it's only a minig, it's a big shaila about the bracha. Rabami said, Arava tzricha shiur. The Arava, the size of the Arava also has a certain minimum size. And also, the mitzvah of Arava is to be taken separately. You can't be yotze the mitzvah of Arava with the Arava that's there inside your lulav. That's what he said. So the Gemara asks on this. Once he said that you must take the Arava separately, so pshita, isn't it obvious that you're not yotze with Arava inside the lulav? Why did he have to say that again? So the answer is because I would think to say hanem mili. When is he not going to be yotze with Arava inside the lulav? If you didn't pick it up twice. If you didn't pick up the lulav once for the mitzvah of Dal Minim, and then a second time for the mitzvah of Arava. Aval agbe, v'hoda agbe. If you picked it up once, and then you picked it up a second time, eimaloi. So maybe then you could be yotze with Arava that's inside the lulav. Kamash malan. That's why he said again that you're not yotze with Arava in the lulav, even if you picked it up a separate time. Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Yitzchak. Rav Chisda, in the name of Rav Yitzchak, argues and says, Adam yotze dechevasei ba'arava shabelulav. You could be yotze the mitzvah of Arava with the Arava and the lulav. When it comes to Shana Rabbah, you don't have to get separate Aravas. You can pick up the lulav once for the mitzvah of lulav, and then you pick it up a second time, or maybe you want to bang it on the ground. The way our minig is today, you can bang it on the ground with the Arava that's inside the lulav. And 2 Aravas is good enough. The minig that we have today, that we have 5 Aravas for the mitzvah of Arava, that's al pi Kabbalah, hey gvuris, but mitzad the minig, that 2 Aravas that are inside the lulav is enough, and as we'll see soon, the shiur is actually even less than that maybe. Let's see. So the Gemara says, V'kama shiura. What's the shiur of the mitzvah of Arava? Rav Nachman, so there's a machlokes here. Rav Nachman says, Gimel bade alen lachen. 3 stems with moist leaves on it. Rav Sheshes says, Afila ala echad ubad echad. Which sounds like what Rav Sheshes is saying is 1 leaf and 1 stem. So the Gemara clarifies, the Gemara asks, ala echad ubad echad salkadaitach? Is that the shiur? To have just 1 leaf, just separately a leaf, and just 1 stem? You don't even see b'chlal what this is. It's like you're not nicker that you're doing a mitzvah b'chlal. Elo eime, so no, what he meant to say is afila ala echad bibad echad. 1 stem with 1 leaf on it. That's the shiur of the mitzvah. Okay, so the Rebbe speaks about this barichas in the Sicha, all these details that it says there regarding this mitzvah of Arava, in connection to the point that I said before, that this mitzvah of Arava is unique. It's always Deicha Shabbos, or we make sure that it doesn't fall out in Shabbos. This shows on that etzem neshama of a yid, that direct connection without any flavor, without any taste, without any smell. So the Rebbe says that this is the reason why, according to one opinion, and this is the way we paskin, it's a minig. We know a minig has a very high source. It says regarding the hakofis that it's something that is not written in Torah, not even in Torah Shabbal Peh, because a minig has a higher source than anything else. It's the same thing with Arava. Arava is only a minig. And also this shiur of Ola Echad, the Bad Echad, the Rebbe shows in the union of Echad, the Achdas, Echad. The deepest connection, no numbers, no divisions, the Echad of the Eibusha that's revealed in the Etzem HaNeshama of a Yid. And another point over here is that this mitzvah of Arava, you can't take it together with the Lulav, because that's missing the whole point. The whole point of the Arava is the Pshitis. Without any other, don't mix in anything else. Just the Arava itself. You want to be Yetzer, the mitzvah of Arava, with the Arava of the Lulav, Adarabah. The whole point is to separate the Arava. Just the Pshitis of a Pashat Yid without any Seichel, without any, nothing else. Just the Arava alone. That's the Ikka Chiddush of this mitzvah of Arava, that it's done separately. Amar Aivu said, I was standing in front of Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzaddik. and a person brought an arava for him, for the mitzvah, shakel, he took it, chavit, so there's two opinions what chavit means. Rashi says he waved it. According to the Rambam, he banged it, like our minik today. V'loi barach, and he made no brach on it. Kasavar, so we see that what Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok held is minik neviim. It's just a minik, so you don't make a brach on this. Aivu v'chizkiye b'nei brati de Rav. They were the grandchildren, the sons of his daughter, of Rav. I saw Rav l'kamei de Rav. They brought for Rav an arava. Chavit. He waved it or he banged it. V'loi barach, he made no bracha. Kasava, Rav is well held. Minig neviimu, that it's only a minig. So this is why we pass in this way today. Amar Aivu. Now, since the Gemara brought what Aivu saw by Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, so the Gemara brings another few things. So Aivu said that Havake imnu kamei de Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. I was standing in front of Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. There was an individual that came to Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, and Amalei, he told Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok as follows: Karyase isli, I own villages. Karmaya isli, I also own vineyards. Zeisaya isli, I own olive trees. And va'osu b'nei karyasa, the people of the vineyards come umekashkishin b'karmaya, and they are weeding they're improving the field. What's the exact translation out there for mekashkishin?
All the vineyards.
Huh?
H-O-E.
Okay. They're improving the vineyard. The Gemara will soon say exactly what they did. And the point that we're talking about over here is, as Rashi says, this was in Shemitah. So these people of the villages are coming and working for me. They're improving the vineyard. And as a payment for them, I give them to eat from the olive trees. So he was asking Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, Arich, is this okay? Is this accepted? Or lo yarich? Or is it not accepted what I'm doing? In Shemitah, am I allowed to have these workers doing this work and I'm paying them from my olive trees? Amalei, so he answered him, lo yarich, you're not allowed to do this. Right? So why isn't he allowed to do this? Because the olive trees are supposed to be hefker for the poor people. You're not supposed to use it to pay your workers. So have a kashavik leva. So he was walking away from Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. Omar, so Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok said, Kadu havisi dairi ba'ara adam memshnin. I've been living here in this area for 40 years. V'lechamisi bar inish. Mahalach ba'orchen de saknon kedain. I haven't seen a person that's walking in a straight path, such a yirei shamayim like this individual. He came, he wanted to know, and he did the right thing, and he accepted the answer happily. So then Hadavasi, this person came back to Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, V'amalei, and he asks him, so my meved, what should I do with these people that are working in my field? So how should I pay them? Amalei, you can't pay them from these olive trees. Afker zeisaya, leave your olive trees to be hefker, l'chashoichya, for the poor people. And v'ten pritya l'kashkushi kramim. And you have to pay from your own pocket, from your own money, you have to pay for these people that are working in your vineyards. That's what he told him regarding Shemitah. Frag the Gemara, v'kashkushi misharye. Oh, the obvious question. So he's not allowed to pay them from these olive trees, because the olive trees are supposed to be hefker for the aniyim. But the question is, why didn't he tell him that they're not allowed to be working in the field? It's Shemitah. What's going on over here? How are they b'chlal working in the field? V'atanya, we learned in the Braise, when the Torah says, v'ashviyas tishmitena on etashta, the Shvi and Shemitah, you should leave the field alone and not work there. So there's specific works that are not allowed to be done in the field. And the Braise says, Tishmitena melakashkesh. Onetashta melasakel. Onetashta means you should leave it alone, not take out the stones and the things that don't allow the trees to grow. And melakashkesh is also a work improving the field, as we'll see in a moment what this is, that you're not allowed to do. So how did he b'chlal allow him to have these workers there in the field? So he answered, today kishkushi have. There's two types of kishkushi. This improving the field in this way. There are two types. One is chad stumi pili. One is to close up the openings that there are when you have the roots of the vineyards that are exposed. It gets ruined. It could ruin the entire vineyard. So that's one type. And v'chad evruye elani. And one is what you're doing in the field to improve, to make the vineyards in a better condition. So avruye ilani, to bring the vineyards to be in a better condition, also that's not allowed to be done in Shemitah. Sesumi pili, just to close up the roots that it shouldn't get destroyed, shari. That's allowed. You're not improving the trees, you're just making sure that it doesn't die, it doesn't get destroyed. That's allowed. And that's what he allowed them. Now there's another incident. So he said in the name of Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, Al Yahalach Adam Ba'arvei Shabbos Yosem Megimel Parsais. A person shouldn't travel on Erev Shabbos a distance more than 3 parsais, because he might arrive home late, he might not come in time, that he won't have time, that food should be prepared for him for Shabbos. He won't have what to eat for Shabbos. Rav Kahana said, Lo yamaran ela lebeisei. That's only if you're coming back home. So if you're coming back home, you don't have any food prepared for yourself. You're relying on the people in your house to prepare the food for you. And they don't know you're coming. You arrive very late and they won't have food for you. Avalo shpize, if you're traveling to a hotel, to another place, you're not going home, so then there's no problem. Amai denokit samich. You probably have food with you. So the food that you're holding in your hands with yourself, you rely on that. Vekedamri, others said differently. Amar Rav Kahana said, Loi nitzreche elo afilu lebeisei. The chiddush over here is, even if you're going home, and when you get home, you're going to find something to eat there, even though they won't prepare food for you, but going home, there should be some food over there. Even going home, you should not travel and come home late before Shabbos, because they might not have enough for you. If you're not going home, for sure you shouldn't travel late before Shabbos, because where you're arriving, nobody's preparing any food there. Amar Rav Kahana said, B'didi ava uvde, with me there was this incident that I traveled on Erev Shabbos this distance and I came late. I couldn't even find a little piece of fish, a little piece of herring. I couldn't find anything to eat for Shabbos. So that's the reason why you shouldn't travel late.
You need a Moroccan wife and you always have food extra.
Okay.
Just for the,
Okay. Sagt the Gemara, let's finish off to the Mishnah. It said, mitzvahs lulav keitzad, that they would bring the lulav to the Beis HaMikdash. When it fell out on Shabbos, they would put it there on the benches. So Tani Tana Kamed Rav Nachman, Seidrin al Gag or Itztaba, that they would set up the lulav on the roof that was on top of these benches. Amalei, so when the Tana, when he was saying this in front of Rav Nachman asked him, why would they put it on the roof on top of these benches? He wanted to be there in the sun and it should get dried up by the sun. A lulav that's dry is puzzle. So then you have to say al gav itztaba, not gag, but gav, on top of the benches they put it. Amar Rachbe, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Harabayis, Stov, Kofel Hoya. In the Harabayis they would have double rows of benches, Stov, Lefnim Stov, one row and inside the other row, and that's where there were the benches, and they had a lot of benches to put the Dalad Minim there when it fell out on Shabbos.